we say this, is there a group of people? Hey, I'm going to carry you, but I need like 10% of this take that you get today. If I'm going to set you down, because he didn't get there by himself. And in the natural, nobody does anything for free, right? Nobody does it out of the goodness of their heart. But it says that he takes them there, and they put him there to ask for alms. Alms is what? As they enter the temple, donations. To ask for donations. Does anybody have anything? And what he does is he encounters Peter. He sees Peter and he sees John, and he probably heard about what was going on and what was happening. And he's not only that, but the thousands and thousands of people that were following. So he probably said, these guys probably have some money. They're running with a lot of people. There's something happening here. So what they do is they go up to Peter, and he asks for some offering. He asks for some donation. And he's fixing his eyes on them. Peter said, look at us. As they were going into the temple, Peter grabs this guy, this gentleman, and he says, I need you to focus on me. How many of us know that we need to focus more on what God is doing? We can't get into what God is about to do if we don't focus on what is currently in front of us. A lot of times we're running 100 miles a minute. We've got this happening, we got that happening. Like when we went and picked up these chairs, it was 100 miles a minute. Okay, let's get this. We've got to go here. And so we have all of these plans. But sometimes we just need to focus on what God has set right in front of us. Peter kind of grabs this guy's attention. And what's interesting is he grabs this guy's attention, but his response isn't, okay, I've got what you're looking for. Because a lot of times we come asking for something and we don't even need that something that we're asking for. They're asking, and he's asking for donations. And Peter grabs his attention and he says, I don't have gold and silver, I have neither. But what I'm about to give you, if you would look past what you're looking for. How many of us come into the church looking for something? We're looking to get something out of the church. We're looking to get something out of relationships. But if I go into this, how will this impact my life? And not just for a moment. Peter wasn't looking to impact this individual's life for the moment. He was looking at eternity right here. He was doing exactly what Jesus had told him needed to happen. It had kind of clicked inside of Peter. Peter is almost like, I get this. I get this now. It's bigger than what is right now. So it says that he grabbed him and fixed in his eyes. Verse 5, so he gave them his attention, expecting to receive something from them. See, how many of us, we'll do that, right? You can even be in a church service, and even as you're preaching or singing, you can see individuals out there and they're having conversations amongst themselves. And we're not focusing on what God is doing or what God is about to do. So it says that he fixed his eyes on him because he was expecting to get something out of that. Then Peter said in verse 6, silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have to give you, and I like how he does this. He presents this not out of what he can do. Peter isn't here for him. Peter isn't doing this out of his goodness. Peter isn't doing this to get his attention. Peter says, what I do have to offer you is in the name of Jesus of Christ, of Nazareth. And kind of really specifying who it was to this individual. And there's a crowd around listening and taking all of this in, right? So he says in verse 7, simply, and he says at the end of 6, he says, rise up and walk. Rise up and walk. How many of us could take that right there at face value? If somebody came to you in the midst of your affliction, whether you couldn't see, whether you couldn't walk, whether you couldn't move, whatever it was, whether you were blind, and they just said, get up. Get up. How many of us are in a position where we've put ourselves there? And simply all we need to do is get up out of it. You just simply get up out of that situation. And so Peter is telling them, and he took him by the right hand, And he lifted him up, and immediately, not over time, not after a couple times of saying this, that, and the other, but immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength. The thing that was the weakest was strong. It was made new and it was made whole. With exactly what he actually needed. Imagine if he would have asked for this years ago, prior to this, maybe even when Jesus was around, instead of trying to live day to day. And sometimes we're in that mode. We don't ask. A lot of us will ask for some money instead of a job. You know, that old saying where teach a man to fish and he'll eat forever, right? And a lot of us will settle for, I'll just take the fish today. You know, but what he's saying, get up. What you really needed to do was to be able to get up and walk, and he was strengthened. And I like how he acted upon it, because he didn't even think twice about it. He leaped up and stood and walked and entered. He entered into some place that he had never went before. This faith, this miracle, this occurrence, this listening to Peter took him somewhere that he was never able to go before. And I've seen it. When you just trust God, it'll take you to places. And not only that, you'll go into that place somebody totally different. Not the guy that was this, that, and the other yesterday. Not the girl that had this reputation about this, that, and the other. But you go into there trusting God and knowing what He's already done. And for a lot of us, salvation is more than enough. Knowing that He's already done that, and He's taking us into a place. It's almost like when He went up on the cross, it says that He ripped the veil. We were able to enter into the gates. And we have a representation of this man that was lame since birth. Not he was pretending. Even before the disciples came, this was something that was always there. He was that individual. I remember living in Chicago, and you could pull up to a certain street, and you would always know that it was this guy that would come out and he would ask at this light. There was always a guy, and he had one leg, and he was on a crutch, and he would always make his way out there. And he wasn't even asking or begging. He was selling flowers. And people would stop, and they would give him whatever he needed. But you could see it like clockwork every day. When you came back from work, and he hit that busy traffic, he knew that they were there. 9, and then all the people saw him walking and praising God. Verse 10, then they knew that it was he who sat begging at the gate beautiful of the temple. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. When I see this, I think this divides the crowd. We talked about that last week. When Jesus does something, it divides the crowd. You have your yays and you have your nays, right? And this is almost like when he had casted out all the demons from Legion. You know, they saw him and he was all like brand new. And this individual was brand new as well. But there were people that were mad about this. They were mad about what had happened. Verse 11 says, now as the lame man who was healed held on to Peter and John, all the people ran together to them in the port. Isn't that interesting? I think how that labels that as the lame man who was healed. And I think that title is almost unnecessary, because he's not the lame man anymore. Yeah, it's kind of hanging on to that, and maybe for description, but how many times do we do that? You know, we look at a person's past, even though something has happened, even though God has proved it. And this is what basically what Peter is doing. He is proving out what Jesus did on the cross in this instance. And not only that, but as this is all happening, I want you to see what God is doing. This is a miracle happening, and it's drawing people for a reason. It's people are excited. People are wondering about this. And what it does is it brings opportunity for Peter to get up and preach what he's about to preach. How many of us take those opportunities?
Well, here this guy, I don't know how you're going to teach this. You're going to read it all and then go back. But here's a couple of good, awesome things to learn that on both sides. Like Peter was
Right.
He never took the glory.
Right.
And how many of us want credit for what we've done? Like when we preach, oh, well, I preached a good word, don't you think? Or what did you think about the word that I preached? Or this or that. It was never look at me, I'm preaching. It was look at me, I come in the name of Jesus. I cannot give you anything. You know, and where nowadays people feel, and we allow them to feel, that we can help them. We can't help anybody.
Right.
God, he said, look at me. I can't give you what you need. I can't, there's not enough money in the world to help you because you don't need money.
Right.
You need legs.
Right.
That's what you need. And the only one that can give that to you is the Father. And he will give it to you. So watch him do him. And that's what we need to do. We need to lead people to Christ, not to us. And then the second thing I thought was neat was sort of that the lame man saw Peter. He'd been there all the time, and we have seen poor people or lame people, especially in Chicago, but ask for money. They don't care. They're not actually looking. They're just saying, "Give me money, give me money." You know what I mean? They're not paying attention to one certain person. It was very clear that he saw Peter and John, just like Moses saw the burning bush.
There was
He saw
something.
them and he knew, I need something. Even though it was wrong what he was asking for, he went to the right source. And we also need to go to the right source. Even if we don't know how to ask it, if we go to the right source, the answer will come.
Matthew 5 says what? Let your light shine before all men. There was something about these two. There was something about these two that made this occurrence happen. Is there something about you? Or are you just like everybody else? Or are we just lost in the crowd? You had something?
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, this is what I taught on this over at being a 3-1. But the one thing that I, you know, to add on to what you're saying, Pastor, is that I love what the scripture says that he looked upon them expecting to receive something. And I've always held on to that when I read it in the scriptures that if he was outside of the temple, we're here inside the temple. And like you were saying earlier, Pastor Pete, you know, people you look out in the crowd, those of us that are on the platform, and people are talking and they're having their own side little conversations in the middle of the service and everything. But if we would come in expecting to receive something of the Lord, if we would come in, and how much more explosive would God's power be in our lives? How much more would we experience those things that God needs us to experience in the midst of our trials and tribulations? When we think that we need whatever this is, when we just need His trust. We just need to trust in Him. We're going to get His peace. You know, so I've always said that in that regard, I've always maintained that the spirit of expectancy precedes the spirit, an atmosphere of breakthrough, an atmosphere of miracle. So because, you know, when people will go